All right, Harry. Today we're in Genesis chapter 22. It's about Abraham getting tested. We're going to start from verse 1. It says, "Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, 'Abraham, here I am,' he replied. Then God said, 'Take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on a mountain I will show you.' Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him two of his servants and his son Isaac." What are your thoughts, Harry?
Yeah, all my life I've struggled with this chapter, and I have to say I still do. This is so big an item to think of, that the promised son, that he's waited 100 years for him to be born. Well, he was 100 when he was born, I mean, and now God is asking him to offer up his son, and that was normal in those days, but not for Abraham, of course. But he trusted God. Somehow this would all happen. All things would go well. Um, so why would Abram obey this request? I always think, that seems just too much. But I believe he'd really trusted God in a real way. You want to read verse 8?
Yeah, for sure. It says, "Abraham answered, 'God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son.' And the two of them went on together." So we see there that he knew that God would provide this offering.
Yeah, he had no idea, but so far, see, he's been walking with God for 40 years now, and he knows that God's real, and God has provided a son as a miracle in his old age, and this is the son of promise, and everything's going to be good. So yeah, he's going to do what God asked him, because it's always turned out okay. So, as the word says, God spoke, and early the next morning he left, it says, and on third day he saw the place. Isaac carried the wood for the burnt offering. So how old was Isaac at this time?
I would say mid-teens, right? Is that fair?
Yeah, maybe 16. He was carrying the wood, so he had to be a pretty strapping guy. So how old was Abram then?
Well, 100 years plus whatever age Isaac was.
Yeah, so he's 116. So did Isaac cooperate with his father to be tied down to the altar?
He must have, right? Because
Yeah.
just common logic would say a 16-year-old versus a 100-plus-year-old man we know who would definitely win that
Yeah.
one.
So both did what God required. Somehow they both saw God. Isaac loved God and his father more than life. He knew something would work out. Abram loved God more than his son. They all passed the test. And then 2,000 years later, a little side note here, not a side note, but it's interesting. 2,000 years later, another offered up his son on the same mountain. This time, the son Jesus died and passed the test. The father offered up his son so we can live. We too need to take up our cross. We too need to pass the test. So going back to Abram. So that Abram always passed the test. At age 75, Abram and Sarah, age 65, God called Abram to be his man to make a great nation. He traveled to the modern day Israel, the land promised to him. He passed the test. He set out. They waited for the promised son to make a great nation. Both were very old. They waited 10 years. Nothing happened. They decided to have a child through the maid Hagar. They failed the test. God was still promising. So the promised child arrived. Abram was 100, Sarah 90. All is well now. Other test. Abram actually lied about Sarah being his wife a couple of times because he was afraid of the people he was around. He failed that test. There were troubles with Lot, and they both had a large herd. He gave Lot the best portion of the land, so he passed the test. He was generous. Then he rescued Lot when he was captured with Sodom, and him with 300 men went and chased after the other kings, outnumbered 1,000 to 1, and yet brought back Lot and trusted God to do this for him. He passed the test. One day, 3 men showed up at his camp. Abram ran to feed them and serve them. He passed a test. He had just fed God and 2 angels. So yeah, he got a lot of tests. He passed most of them, and he passed the biggest one of all. What about us? What are our prayer requests? Are they to remove the test or to give us strength and wisdom and courage to deal with them? We all have family strife, financial, health. These are all normal. Do we bravely walk forward to see how God moves in our lives, or do we ask to have the test removed? How can we
Mm,
how can we pass a test we don't want?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Harry, I have a question for you. What do you pray then, right? When you're going through a test, let's say something like a strife that you just mentioned happens in your life. What's something you would pray to God about to for a format for us?
Well, we basically, I ask for wisdom and courage to deal with it. That's the main thing. The outcome is really up to him. It always turns out that way. And so I really don't worry about the outcome of every problem. But if there's problems, you ask that I can do right, and also ask that God would intercede for the person that is things are going sideways for. And sometimes that he'll deal with them and give them a little bit of a experience to remind them about God, because again, they God can send incidents into their life that would wake them up, and that's what we have to hope for. That most people are aware. Most people I'm familiar with are aware that God is real, and experiences are sometimes what they need.
Amen. Thanks a lot for this, Harry.
Yeah, thank you.